All right. Final session for today's marathon. We're going to get a Calamari API Roadmap overview from Gregory.
Hey,
Dr. Meno,
Patrick,
if you want to take it away.
thanks. I'd be happy to. Do we have relevant people on the call, or since we're bumped up a little bit?
Let's see. Get Dan.
I like to think I'm relevant.
Awesome.
All right.
All right, cool.
I think John might have been to bed.
Yeah, it's totally understandable. So the purpose of this really is just to kind of give an overview of where Calamari is, talk about what the goals are, who the intended users are of Calamari, what it has right now, what we're planning to do at the next release, and how the community can get involved. So kind of to kick it off, I think it's something we've been meaning to do for a while, but we're going to redefine Calamari as the backend services and the API layer minus the graphical user interface, because a lot of time we have discussions with people in the community, in Red Hat, and there's a lot of confusion about what Calamari is. If you include the GUI, it seems like a lot, like a kind of a large piece to swallow. But the GUI is really just a visualization of everything that's possible within the API and everything that's tracked in the backend service Thulu. So we thought that by separating out the GUI, the conversation could be more focused on what Calamari is and isn't, and how that works with other players in the space for dashboards, managing and monitoring Ceph, and how other people could get started using it. So we're going to rename the GUI at some point in time. It's currently called Calamari Clients, and when you put it all together, with some other bits, it becomes Think Tank Ceph Enterprise. But the thing we're talking about right now is just the services in the backend and the API. And the goal for that really is to achieve parity of functional parity with the command line tools of Rados, RBD, and RGW. So the idea would be that we're trying to provide a consistent RESTful interface to all the functionality that you get from the command line, but do it in a way that often can map the RESTful verbs onto several actions in the command line, so that if you're trying to, for example, create crush nodes, there's a lot of different pieces that go into that, and you wouldn't want to have to burden someone who's a REST user with all the little details of this invocation, that invocation. And because we get to do it again, we get to profit from the switches and kind of the shape of the command line interface and understand how to make it more consistent and more consumable. The other thing that Calamari buys you is it's an asynchronous interface. So every time you request something that takes more than a trivial amount of time, it reports back to you. So for operations that would change state, they report back to you a request ID so that you can track that for the future, but you get control back to your interface right away. So for example, when you create a pool, naturally that's going to go through a process that's going to take an appreciable amount of time, and if you waited for it, in a graphical user interface or web client, it's not a good idea, because then you lose the ability to interact with the interface while you're waiting for that. So we send back an ID, and you can track it by asking for the request ID's status, whether it's completed, completed a success, completed with errors. And so it's really trying to kind of elevate the semantical interaction with Ceph, the command line, to a point where it's a little bit easier to swallow, a little bit less surface.
Does it do that for all operations, or just the ones that are sort of identified as being potentially slow?
So the kind of way that it's separated is if you're doing something that, it's basically if you're doing something that's a list or a detail, like if you're trying to find out detail or a list of resources, those things happen instantaneously. They come right back because Thulu's tracking all that stuff through each, the iteration of the OSD map or stuff like that. So it knows all those facts and can communicate them across the RPC right away. Whereas any change to something within is something that would incur that extra time. So whenever you
Any write,
update, whenever you
guess.
create, yeah, basically write. So when you're creating,
Okay.
updating, and deleting, that's the sort of thing
Okay.
that we tackle asynchronous. So if you're just reading, you get the results back right away.
That's nice because it'll map cleanly onto the stuff that like RBD is going to do that's going to be slow, like importing or whatever.
Yeah.
Deleting. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the hope there. And so back to what I was saying about the, taking the GUI out of the equation. One of the things we've been getting a lot lately is just kind of okay, well, how do we integrate with Calamari? What does Calamari get us? And, when you see it from the dashboard that we've created, and it's you're like, well, it's a pretty picture, but maybe it doesn't do what I want, or maybe I want to organize it differently, or maybe I see it, integrating with some other tool. Well, the beauty of changing the scoping, and really honing in on what Calamari being the API is that the story then becomes, well, these are the parts of that CLI, that are implemented within Calamari. And this is the way that you talk to it. And so, most often programmers get pretty happy when they see an API interface because it means that all the logic's not baked into the GUI and that it's got a clean separation. And indeed, that is the case here. So for the example of any of the other community projects that got started before Calamari went open source, it can be a win for them because, they may already have people that are signed up for what their look and feel is, and they don't want to give the impression that they're changing products, but maybe they want to get, some more consistency, or they like our model a little bit better. So they could take their front end and start talking to the Calamari API, and in doing so, improve the Calamari API, because when you have more consumers of an interface, it becomes better. You know more that it's going to work for other things than just Calamari clients, right? So we talked with some people at Orange, and they have a product called Inkscope, and that was one of the subjects of discussion was, how can Inkscope and Calamari live together? And what I proposed to them was that the way Inkscope would live is that, you could take all the parts out that we've already done in Calamari and integrate on top of Calamari, which sounded interesting. And, that's another part of this this session here is kind of laying out what is implemented and talk about what we're trying to do in the short term, and maybe get feedback on would it be more helpful to do something else, if other people want specific areas of the functionality that we haven't covered yet, because we've done a pretty heavy hand on OSDM pool, and we've stayed out of some of the other places. Like we don't do a whole lot of the mon commands. We do nothing with the metadata server yet, and we do very little. There's no auth. So different tasks that you want to accomplish with something like this may or may not be possible depending on how much coverage we have. But the ultimate goal of Calamari is to have enough coverage, near 100%, so that anything you would want to do can be done. So there's that. That basically is the summary of what are the goals of the API and what are we calling Calamari these days. The next thing I really want to talk about is, I think it's kind of segueing into what I already have mentioned, is the intended uses. So there's a lot of different things that interact with Ceph, and by providing this interface, it's going to be a lot easier for them to, be able to integrate with Ceph in a meaningful way, because there's a lot of technologies within Red Hat, within the community, that need something like this, that has the consistent interface that allows them to program against. And, the CLIs, it's great, and there's a lot of it, and it grew organically. So it can be, as we've seen with Calamari, getting integrated with it can be a challenge. There's definitely the JSON output is super helpful, and, so at some point it can be, is this resource consumable in a meaningful way? And that's really the challenge we're trying to bridge here, is that we want to make it so that it's easy for people who are trying to program interfaces for this to get the things that they would want to have, easily consumable. So, so the kind of list in this really basic, there's OpenStack, there's all these storage technologies within Red Hat. And there's the other community projects, and it would really be a shame now that Calamari is open source for them to go ahead and do all the same work that we've already done. And it would be great to get them to contribute in a way that says, this is useful to me, I like this, I would like it better if it did this, because that way we can have a great implementation that is not duplicating effort across the community and within different products. So anyone who thinks that they might have some benefit from using this API, we definitely encourage them to come around. We've got a mailing list. We do sessions at CDS. We have daily stand-ups, and we'd love to hear all sorts of feedback. And that's kind of the next step of this. We made it, and it would really help us take it farther forward if we see more people, talking about how they could use it, how they intend to use it, how they'd like to see it change and develop. So with that, I'd be happy to go into kind of the current state of where Calamari is. This last week, in preparation for this and kind of the feature planning for 1.3 Calamari, which is going to be feature frozen sometime early next year, targets, I think, end of January. So I was doing an analysis of, for all the things that are on the CLI, how much have we covered, and I've come to kind of the summary that for the Redos, for Ceph, when you say Ceph help, it spits out a whole bunch of commands. We've got about 30% of what that is. So, like I said, OSD's covered well, pools covered well, and the rest of the stuff is, a lighter touch. Definitely a light touch on Mon, and there's some things that we haven't gone to so far. So we haven't focused on RD at all. We haven't focused on GW at all. So that's kind of where we are. The plan long ago was to kind of finish out Rados, finish out the Ceph commands, and then move on to the next one that makes sense. We're coming to realize that that may be the way we want to go, and we're not sure. A lot of it depends on how we try to approach the feature or the version after this next release. I know Neil has plans to take Calamari and Inktank Ceph Enterprise in direction to try and get it to go from nodes to usable storage in a very short amount of time. And I think that we may have to go a different direction if we're going to support that, which is awesome because I think it's a great goal. And I would love to see people have more success with setting up the storage cluster and being able to manage and monitor it with a lot less fiddling.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, all right. If there's any questions about that.
So has the GUI bit been official to Calamari clients? Has that been the name on that been settled? Is that renamed?
It hasn't been settled. I mean, it's still kind of up in the air. I would like to post on the mailing list to kind of get everyone's either nod of approval or silence means yes, because it's a thing. A little bit more than no work whatsoever to change it, especially updating the builds, updating all the docs and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'd like to pick the right name the first time, but I think that's something you can dispense with pretty quickly because it's one of those things I don't want to talk about anymore. I really just kind of want to get done with it.
Yeah.
The current proposal for the name. Yeah, that's the current front runner.
Okay.
Since no one said anything else. I mean, so Ramona is the plan for it, and really that's just to help differentiate the GUI from Calamari and kind of draw the line that, well, it's a great visualization and it's a really cool thing and fun to play with. It really does everything that's in Calamari. There's no smarts in it. There's no business logic within it. It's just a visualization, and any of the other products could leverage Calamari in the same way.
Yeah.
Although it should be pointed out that the Calamari clients are pretty useless without Calamari.
Yeah, and that's kind of the sticking point of the rename as well. It doesn't do anything without Calamari, right?
I think we should name it a Calamari client. One of many possible Calamari clients. There we go.
Yeah.
Just singular Calamari client. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Um,
So what else?
I think one of my big questions for Calamari, well, I think there's sort of two questions. One is like there are like 3 or 4 other GUIs that have sprung up. There's like the Metro Ceph one. There's Inkscope. There's Kraken, and there's I think another one.
Yeah.
Or I'm curious like what state of like active development those are under, and whether they're looking at or using Calamari yet.
That's a good question. So
And then
in terms of, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
So in terms of the list, you've hit most of it. There's a couple other ones that are kind of we've seen them like Dashing Ceph, and I think there's one other one that has ink something in the name. I made a survey of them recently, and I think I passed it out to the mailing list about these are all things that could use it in the future, or if I haven't, I need to. So far, the only ones that have really engaged us, Intel has a product which isn't open source at the moment, and they're considering doing some integration with us. And there's the Inkscope people from Orange. So of the 6 to 8 projects, only 2 have really engaged with us. And for the rest of them, they seem to be like, hey, look what we did. And it's kind of like the basic thing. I don't have a good answer for the vitality. I haven't been tracking it really carefully, but I think that's something that it really makes sense going forward. If there continues to be any kind of traction, we should really reach out to them a little bit more forcefully. So I'm going to take that in the Etherpad.
Yep. And then the other thing, which I think is one of the biggest actual probably speed bumps for people, is just that we don't have upstream packaging for any of these things yet. Right now, the only way to deploy this is with like Vagrant or manually,
well, we have packaging. We just don't have packages.
Right.
Running the package build is tough, and Tim knows. Go ahead.
Yeah. Am I on?
You are.
Yep.
Oh, good. Hey guys. So I've got packages for OpenSUSE and SLES 12, and I this only works if you've also got. Sorry, I'll start again. They're being built with the OpenSUSE build service, and for this to work, we can't use Vagrant inside OBS instances. So I've kind of picked apart the build and made sure that we've got distro packages of all of the dependencies as well. And so at the moment, this works for SUSE. It presumably wouldn't be too much difficulty to make it work for Fedora or Red Hat as well, because the dependent packages are very similarly named, and my RPM build thing works fine. One of the kinks is that at the moment it installs everything in opt Calamari, whatnot. I have some. I've got a separate branch which puts things in, user lib, whatever. But it would be better to integrate that in the build more sensibly, so that the path that things get installed to is a build time define or something like that, so that I can put that in without actually ruining things for Vagrant builds, because I don't want to screw that up and I don't want to make the build more complicated. But I haven't done that yet, so that's something that I'm happy to do that, or to figure out a sort of clean way of doing that.
Yeah, that was a great point, Tim. So, I think one of the things that kind of would be a bump in that path, or something we have to carry out to destroy opt Calamari and put them in the sensible places, the distro-defined prefixes, is we need to take the dependencies we have on a custom version of Diamond, and I think that one's really the thing that stands out in my mind, and graphite can be a little finicky too. But diamond specifically, we have a custom package of that. It would probably be good to try and get the upstream code merged so that we don't have, conflicts with other system level packages.
Yep.
Yeah, although that is just a delta in our existing package, it's something that we could clean up and be that much more standard. I think the only impediment to merging that
Dan, you're
code.
chopping a little bit.
Sorry, not sure what to do about that. I think the only impediment to doing anything with that code was to get the testing fixed up. So I guess there were a fair bit of tests in the original Ceph module that may or may not really apply, and so it was more difficult than just adding in a couple of new cases. It needed some restructuring, but that's kind of independent, of course, of where we install the stuff in the file system, and we're certainly not married to opt. I think that was just a random choice from long ago in the project, so that's easy enough fixed.
Sorry, Tim, your packages get rid of opt, I take it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sweet. Well, that's definitely awesome.
You probably have a better idea where it ought to have gone to begin with, so we may well just follow you there.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if it's just a matter of sort of tasking Boris with going through all of those OpenSUSE SLS packages and just slurping them up into Fedora, basically. Right.
It'd be a start, at least.
And then we got to do the same for Debian and Ubuntu.
Right.
And enlist James Page or something. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is a great place for the community to get involved.
Yeah. Look, my OpenSUSE packages are slightly outdated, so I'll update them today or tomorrow, and then I'll post some notes to the mailing list and see where we end up.
Awesome, thank you, Tim. So I guess the other question then, when you say stale, kind of makes me think of something else. Is we're not too far away from maybe sharing some of the fruits of our packaging. We don't produce packages in a more than on-demand fashion. What do you think about adding those to some place where people can get at them?
It's something I've been wanting to do with the packages we build, and there's no good reason we can't. Again, it's primarily because we started closed source, but they've been open for a while. It's really just a matter of having the CI tooling and the agreement for having a public place on the server to drop these things. There are Jenkins builds that don't run automatically, but when they build, there's no reason they can't deliver that output someplace. Yeah. And yeah, I'd be happy to have Tim's SUSE packages somewhere, perhaps right next to them, in some centralized location.
Yeah, with Giant, there's the new download.ceph.com layout that has all the other Ceph stuff. I mean, that's ideally where this would all end up.
Kind of what we've been waiting on, is for that to for enough to get out of Sandon's hair so we can finish that. Basically,
yeah, it's just all the dependencies.
Yep,
it's like all the random Python modules and Diamond and everything else. Yep.
It's always all the dependencies, yeah. Yep. But we've got a pretty good idea of what those are because of ICE, so it's just a question of assembling them, not discovering them, at least.
Yep. Sort of peripherally related, I suppose. A thing that we know that needs to happen also, and this will interest him primarily, I suspect, is that some of the dependent packages are moving forward with bug fixes that we know we want. There's a libcmq fix that we really do need for precise. There's newer versions of Salt that we really want on both the minion and the master for various reasons, and we need to do a refresh of those relatively soon anyway. So the time is ripe for re-examining all those dependencies and re-examining what's in the distributions.
Yeah, Salt 2014 1.14 I think released this week.
And 2014.7 is already out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think that's a release candidate still, isn't it?
Or is it? I thought they did a final for version 1 of that. Maybe not.
You might be right.
The version is the year month.
Yeah,
sort of
a year. Yeah, it's like year, month, and then build number or something like that.
Yeah, okay.
So 2014.1 is the series that started this year in January.
In January, right. 14, whatever.
And then, yeah,
Okay.
.7 is the one, yeah.
Okay.
This is the one that should have started in July, but just got shipped in October. Yes.
Yeah.
So they're better than Ceph, is what we're trying to say.
Cool.
That's awesome.
About the packages for SUSE, it's maybe easier to simply point to the build servers in this case, because this for SUSE users easier to simply take the repository from there and pick up all dependencies. So it makes no sense to mirror this on some Ceph FTP server also.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair to say. I mean, each distribution has their own way of including, community build packages. For example, like the Debian space has the apt-add repository.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I guess we've had a lot of navel gazing around this whole subject around what we're doing with Ceph in general, and we've been relatively distro agnostic and relatively kind, shall we say, in building a lot of different kinds of upstream packages to have them out there so that people can use Ceph very easily. But that's not normally the method of doing things, right? Normally there's an upstream repository that has the source, and then the distros go build packages. So the kind of confusion between those is always a issue for Ceph, but it's nicer to have as many places as you can get useful packages as possible. Particularly when a project's new, like Calamari is, when we really want to drive adoption.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
What's next for you, Tim? Just out of curiosity. You've got this. I mean, I guess your original goal was to get all this stuff built for FirstLess and OpenSUSE.
That was the original goal. That's well, like I said before, I want to see what I can do about that op Calamari, putting the op Calamari stuff in the build upstream, or removing that, or at least suggesting ways to change that. At SUSE, we've sort of been focusing on getting Ceph running and supported on SLE 12. So we've got stuff that we're releasing on that front sometime in the coming months. So I'm not sure exactly when, or if I meant to say. But no, I mean, nothing that's not hasn't already been spoken about in public.
The Calamari and the GUI is going to be part of that.
Yeah.
I would infer that. Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay.
So we're doing this. Just hang on 1 second. Sorry. Look, we previously had Ceph shipped as part of SUSE Cloud, which is our supported SUSE packaged version of OpenStack, and so we were splitting that out into a separate thing called SUSE Storage, which is just if you only want to get Ceph off of SUSE and want that supported by us on SLAs and everything, then you can get SUSE Storage or you can get SUSE Cloud. So that's what's coming down the pipe from us. But and it made sense for us to because Calamari had been open sourced and the Calamari certainly backend was seemed to be the upstream blessed way of interacting with this thing, then we wanted to get on board and help with that. Oh, excuse me. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so just to kind of summarize, I mean, I think we're kind of all in agreement that opt Calamari is really kind of the next thing for packaging to move forward, because it's likely that package maintainers are going to balk at having stuff put out there. So, yeah, Tim, strike up a conversation on the mailing list, and let's focus on getting rid of that thing.
Certainly.
Awesome. Great to hear. So next on the agenda is really just a talk of what the plans are for the next version of Calamari with regard to the API. The kind of current plan for feature freezing in January 2015 is we're gonna improve the crush support further, which was the original goal. We're gonna try and make it so that Calamari can manage crush nodes and rules so that you can create visualizations that are improved, with the notion of knowing about crush and being able to change it from the API. So for the API, we're just focusing on more Rados functionality because we think that in the near term, changing the course of that ship is probably not the right choice. And once we get some of the new people on board, Travis and whatnot, we'll have a better idea of what's going to be happening in ICE in the next version, and so that'll probably help inform probably where we're going to need to go with Calamari. So for that, it's just more crush management, create, retrieve, update, and delete for the major types there, which are nodes and rules. Some other features that are planned for Calamari in the next release 1.3 is we're planning to show multi-cluster within Ramana, the GUI. That's been supported within the backend for quite a while now. So it has the ability to track, manage, and monitor different clusters, keys them off of the FSID. And so we're just kind of taking that last piece and putting it out into the visualization so that people have a clearer picture that it's not just one cluster, it can manage more than that, so it has more utility. So that's an existing feature that we're going to try and highlight a little bit with the web interface. And also we've been getting a lot of requests from PS and professional services and different users that they want a way to interact with Calamari that's more than just you have a super user and that super user can wreak havoc on your cluster, by deleting pools, and they can, do all kinds of stuff. It's like it's the loaded gun thing. So we're going to introduce some role-based authorization in Calamari in the next version, and the plan right now is to go forward with 3 roles. One can only read the resources, so it can just poke around, see what's happening, look at stuff. We're going to have one read-write sort of role, which allows, for the creation of all the things that Calamari can do, with the exception of other roles and users. And then we're going to have the super user retained, and that one's going to be all the stuff that I already mentioned, plus the ability to create new users and map them to roles. So for, since the timeline on 1.3 is not many sprints away, I think we've got November and December, of course the holidays, and January, so not a lot of time. What we plan to do with that is we're going to take the Django user model. Calamari is loosely incorporates bits of Django, and so we're going to take their user model and just exploit that in the short term, and we're going to take those users and map them onto one of those 3 roles. So in any kind of scenario that we go, whether we're using Active Directory or LDAP or some product like FreeIPA that can make interacting with LDAP and AD easier. I mean, in every scenario, you need to have a notion of roles baked into the the product, the Calamari API. So we feel that those are probably the right ones to start with, and it's just going to be able to limit pretty grossly what different users can accomplish, and then tie a user model to that so that Django is going to give us a lot of batteries included with regard to managing those users. It has an admin interface, which is, it's pretty basic, but it allows all the kind of stuff you'd expect to do within a web product to, add users, update users, remove users, etc. And so most of the UI for that's going to be probably a light templating touch on that, and then we're going to store those within our local Postgres database, so that when you do start the conversation of, well, okay, your roles are great, or maybe your roles are good, and we want a few more, but we want to use our external user management to talk to this thing, and that gets the conversation started for, well, okay, that's great. What do you mean? And I mean, so far, what I've been able to determine is that in most of those scenarios, the stories about user management kind of go away, and what you're talking about then is finding out groups from something like LDAP and mapping those groups onto the roles that Calamari knows about. So again, the roles need to be there, but we need some kind of code to write to say, okay, this user is part of some network admin groups within LDAP, and network admins maps to read write, something like that. But if we don't get to that point where it solves the problem for people who don't have enterprise infrastructure and a bunch of services set up, we're never going to start talking about, well, what does it mean to have more than just a super user? So those are the three big things that are planned for Calamari in the next version: multi-user, multi-cluster in the GUI, and better cache management within the API. Any questions about that? Yep, sounds like
good.
Yes for the plan.
That's awesome.
Sweet.
All right, which brings us to our final point, really, which is opportunities for community involvement. And I think there's a lot of opportunities now that Calamari's gone open source as part of the transition from Inktank to Red Hat. I think it really depends on what kind of contributions the community wants to make. I mean, we have our docs for the API. They're built in Read the Docs. They're based on Sphinx. Documentation's a great thing, and we always need more of it and better docs. The stuff we have right now is pretty solid. It's all linked from our GitHub page, so if you look in the README, you'll see links to that and some of the other resources. We use Tracker just like Ceph does, so we have most of the plans for what we're doing put up in Tracker as features and bugs, and we always love to get reports on new stuff. Discussion can happen there. We have a mailing list, so we can be engaged, in the mailing list, and we have these sessions at CDS, and we love to hear what the community is trying to accomplish and try to, figure out how we can get there and help them do that. There's, of course, the packaging work that Tim's been helping out with, which has been awesome. So, there's opportunities there to package Calamari, which is, I think everyone knows that that's going to help the getting Calamari to the next stage of people using it. If it has a lot easier packages to download for whatever distribution you want, people are going to get involved with it a lot more because it'll be a lot easier to try out, which is kind of the theme we've been focusing on since we've become open source, is how do we make it easier for people to manage and monitor Ceph? How do we make it easier for people to engage with Calamari? And packages for the different distributions is going to go a long way there. So I'm really happy to see that, and Suse definitely has been taking the lead. I think that's awesome, and we're working on ways to get it built in Fedora and RHEL. Dan's been doing a lot of work there, so packages are coming along, but not super easy. So we've got to keep working through that stuff. There's opportunities for people to contribute code.
Timmy,
Go ahead.
sorry,
Go ahead,
Tim, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
What did you do about the customizations we had done to Graphite?
I grabbed your branch of that and just made a package of it on the Open Build service for
Okay, so just a revved package. That's cool.
Yeah.
The thing that will definitely make this easier is if we can get the distros to start building the packages, and I'm really encouraged by Tim's work that he's made this happen in one place. We can do a similar structure in Fedora, I think, relatively quickly, and that should feed Apple, which will help the CentOS and RHEL customers. So I think that's encouraging.
Cool.
I think the one missing person here is James Page, who handles the Ubuntu packaging. He's probably the one to lead that effort. We should go harass him.
Awesome. I know someone will be ready to do some harassing, right? Ken Jar.
Yes. Yep. I think I'll see James at OpenStack in Paris, most likely.
Yeah, we have a little bit of homework to do there for identifying the right dependencies and getting things cleaned up in the same way that Tim has done. But once we do that, we should be able to feed him something relatively buildable.
Cool.
I don't want to needlessly annoy James.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's it. There's lots of places to get involved in from the community. Reach out and talk to us. Mailing list here. It'd be better at the mailing list because it's a lot more frequent. And we're on GitHub, so pull requests are welcome.
Cool.
All right. Does that just about cover it then?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So